Leslie Cornwell, certified nurse midwife with Midwifery Business Consultation. I have one of our longer term consulting client partners, Kristen and Heidi. They have an amazing home birth practice in New York. Deidre and I have been helping them, and it's just amazing to see the transition from the practice opening to where they're at. One of the things, Heidi just recently joined with Kristen, and I really wanted Heidi to expand on what is it like for a nurse midwife that's got experience in the hospital world to jump into the community world, particularly like business and newborn care and those really independent autonomy things that we're just not used to in the hospital world. So thank you both for being here today.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think the biggest difference I have noticed is the autonomy. When I was working in a hospital, there was a guideline for a guideline for a guideline in order to do any practice of midwifery. So you had to adhere to those guidelines constantly, and they weren't usually midwifery friendly. They were, and they were decided by some, committee of 8 people, that some midwives were at the table but weren't listened to, because we keep promoting, saying you got to be at the table, you got to be at the table to make these decisions, but that doesn't really matter even when you're at the table. I mean, that was a hard lesson to learn in the hospital. And it's really nice to honestly have control over how I practice, who I have in the practice, and even being able to take care of babies again. Like, you don't take care of babies in a hospital, you just don't. There's a pediatrician telling you everything. You have no control over that, and all these babies are being supplemented in blood sugars and all these terrible things you're watching these babies go through. So their transition to this world is really traumatic. So that's you can do what makes sense as opposed to doing what the piece of paper says. Like the flow sheet. Yeah, exactly. And I'm able to like personalize it for each family, where it's like you don't have to just do like it's not a cookie cutter thing anyway with birth. But I think the autonomy can be scary as well for some people. I mean, I had nearly 5 years of experience in the hospital, and I had some home birth experience already as a doula before I joined this home birth practice. So I was already exposed to community hospital or community birth. I can see somebody in the hospital feeling like, oh my God, what do I do? And I'm like, here's the deal. Birth doesn't change. Birth is the same. If anything, it's just better because primates don't labor for 2 or 3 days. Like
no inductions, no high risk. We joke all those ladies that come in squeezing cheeks that are super natural doing their thing. That's what you get all the time. Yeah.
Exactly. Like when you're waiting for that one cool birth to come to like reinvigorate you for your midwife cup, it happens every single time. And yeah, I mean, of course there's struggle. You don't have that big team behind you when you're in the home, but you don't need it. Like when you think about, I had this obstetrician once that I knew I was transitioning to home birth, and we had a non-competitive type of situation at the hospital I was working at, and we had a particularly difficult birth, and the baby's heart tones were dropping, and I was getting scared, and I usually don't get scared, but she stood next to me and she put her hand on my shoulder, and she goes, I just want you to remember that this is what I would tell you if you were sitting at home, like everything's going to be okay. She's like, just imagine me putting my hand on your shoulder and saying everything's going to be okay. And I've had that one time so far where I'm like envisioning her do that, where it's like, aww, you have to kind of come up with other ways of what is your next person that you can talk to. I have Kristen, obviously. So like I can call her anytime, which is phenomenal. You don't do that in the hospital either with your partners in the midwife world. Like if you call your midwife who's off call, they'd be like, why are you calling me? This is not what you do, where I have that relationship with Kristen where I can call her anytime, honestly, especially if I'm nervous about anything. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I think part of it is you get fearful of what you don't know and you don't understand. There's a lot of myths and misunderstandings, and people have a comfort level of a call light where there's a bunch of people in the room and you have 2 people. Like your assessment skills have to be really, really sharp, and because you're making all the decisions. Do we need a transfer? Do we need to go in? How long does EMS take? What's the bigger story? But you also have the advantage of you've known these ladies the entire time versus you've met her for the first time and now you're waiting for records to come in a chart, like you digging through tons of paper, hoping you don't miss anything. You know their children, you know their story. When they call you in labor, you have such a level of assessment that the average midwife in the hospital doesn't get to know these ladies.